Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing fantastic. Before we dive into today's content, I want to say a quick thanks for all the support. I know it's been a minute since my last upload, and I appreciate your patience. Life's been a bit of a whirlwind, but I'm back and ready to bring you some seriously cool Last Epoch content today. We're going to be diving into a seriously wicked build for the Acolyte class in Last Epoch. We're talking about a build that's all about inflicting some serious damage over time using poison and necrotic damage. As you know, if you watched my Diablo 4 content for the Druid build I made a while back, I love damage over time stuff. I'm all about it. I'm probably going to make a damage over time build for some other classes in the game if I can, but today we're focusing on the Acolyte. I'm going to give you a small overview of what we plan on doing, and then I'll dive into each thing individually. So first of all, obviously we're playing the Acolyte, we're focusing on poison and necrotic damage, and we're going to be picking up the Warlock Master Tree so we can crank up the devastation even further with some increases damage to our curses and damage over time effects. I'm calling this the Pestilence build. I know it sounds a bit edgy, but it seems to fit the theme perfectly, because it's all about turning your enemies into, kind of squirming, suffering vessels of the dark arts. And it's going to be pretty awesome. It's also a kind of like twist on the current popular Torment build. Here's the kicker. Tapping into this is going to be extremely damaging. You're going to be able to do a lot of damage. However, you are extremely squishy. You are a classic glass cannon setup. You'll be dishing out damage like no tomorrow, but you'll be about as sturdy as a Ford Fiesta and a Hurricane. So your survivability is going to depend on mostly life leech, ward effects, and whatever defensive boost you can snag from your gear. Basically, how you want to think about this is every single chapter that you further in the story, every single chapter you want to have 100 health per chapter. So in chapter 1, you want to have 100 more health than what you started with. Chapter 2, 200 more health, and so on and so forth. And you also want to have your resistances by the time you get to endgame, which is around level 50. 45 to 50, I should say. You want to have them close to cap, if not capped, which is 75%. Anything over 75% is just kind of lost unless you have specific things in builds that actually add damage for your uncapped resistances. Now here's the real big scoop. This is probably in the title, but I'm going to say this here. This is a tailor-made leveling build. However, I'm already scheming up an endgame version, so keep your eyes peeled for that. So if you're ready to embrace the darkness and revel in damage over time, and if you don't mind living on like that razor's edge of survivability, then this build might be for you. Now, obviously you're not going to have access to all of these skills right when you start, because you won't even have your mastery right when you start the game. So just pick whatever you like, or you could even just pick and choose certain things at the beginning, and then branch into this build later on whenever you have access to all these skills. Because respecking in this game is actually fairly unpunishing. It's even faster to level and gain those skills back at higher levels, so it's actually more rewarding just for you to play when you use whatever you want early on, and then branch into this wherever you have the skills and skill points available to you. The one caveat I will say about this build is that early on, you are going to be kind of slower at taking down enemies during the very beginning process, but as soon as you unlock your mastery, you have a fantastic ability called Chthonic Fissure, and that is where you really begin to start to really go into the tipping point of your build. You start to notice that you're starting to really pump out some damage, and you can press one button, like for example Spirit Plague, and you just watch enemies fall over. It's great. So with that small primer disclaimer out of the way, we can now talk about the skills we're going to be using for the whole entire time, which is Spirit Plague, Wandering Spirits, Profane Veil, Chthonic Fissure, and we're also going to be grabbing Soul Feast. The first skill that you're going to pick up early on at level 4 is Wandering Spirits, and it's also when you can get your first skill specialization. So as soon as you get level 4, slap in Wandering Spirits into that slot, and you're going to start taking points and leveling up your Wandering Spirits skill. So first of all, we're going to be going down into the bottom of the tree area, and we're going to be grabbing 2 points on Lingering Souls. Then you're going to grab Infectious Dead, which is to the left of that node. Then you're going to grab Familiar Souls, 3 points on that. And you're going to come back up to Souls of Rage, so your spirits move faster and deal more damage. And then Poison Minds, we're going to grab 3 points on that, so your spirits deal more damage to poison enemies. And then you're going to grab the 1 point in Spectre of Putrescence. This makes it so that your spirits have a chance to cast Spectre of Putrescence at nearby enemies each second. Spectre of Putrescence itself is a projectile with a 100% chance to poison on hit. And then finally, we will be going back down next to that Lingering Souls node, and to the right of it, there's one called Reap the Damned. This makes it so our spirits deal more damage to cursed enemies and damned enemies, putting the last 5 points we have into this. The next skill you're likely going to have access to is Spirit Plague and Chthonic Fissure, depending on how fast you're putting skill points in and how fast you're getting through the campaign. I'm just going to assume that you got Spirit Plague first. So for Spirit Plague, you're going to be going for the Pestilence node, and you're going to be putting 2 points on this. Pestilence gives you a stacking buff of global damage over time increase when you afflict an enemy with Spirit Plague. The effect lasts for 4 seconds and it stacks up to 13 times. This is insane for your damage with what we're going to be doing. Next, you're going to be jumping into the node right next to it on the right called Plague Bear. Enemies you inflict with Spirit Plague are also afflicted by Plague for the same duration. Plague is an ailment that deals poison damage over time, spreads between enemies, and does not stack. This now synergizes with our spirits because now enemies are going to be starting to get more and more poison damage stacked up on them. Along with the global buff from the Pestilence node we got, we're going to be doing a lot more damage, especially if you can keep that buff stacked up. From that Plague Bearer node, we're going to keep moving to the right, and we're going to grab the Queen of Plagues node, and we're going to be putting 3 points into this, and we're going to be jumping to the node directly to the right, and we're going to be grabbing 3 points in Endless Decay. Queen of Plagues, our plague inflicted by Spirit Plague, has additional poison penetration. This helps with our damage because it will ignore a bit of resistances from our enemies. And then Endless Decay, you gain increased poison damage when you inflict an enemy with Spirit Plague, so this goes along with our already existing Pestilence buff. So this is just free extra damage for something we're already going to be doing. From there, you're going to come down to the bottom of the tree, right below the center node, to get Affixes application, and you're going to put 2 points into that. You're then going to jump over to the left to get Toxic Transmission, put 3 points in that. This makes it so enemies you inflict with Spirit Plague are also afflicted with poison for the same duration. It gives them 3 stacks whenever you afflict them with poison, whenever you put all 3 points into it. Then you're going to be coming back to the right and going the node to the right called Perpetuity. Spirit Plague will get increased cast speed and last longer. Then you're going to be jumping to the left and grabbing Hindering Affliction. Enemies afflicted by Spirit Plague are now slowed. We're just putting 1 point in this so we can move over to the left and grab Enfeeblement. Enemies you inflict with Spirit Plague are now inflicted with Frailty. Frailty makes it so that enemies deal less damage to you when they have a stack of Frailty on them. And Plague of Eyes at the bottom is our final point we're going to be putting in. Spirit Plague has additional spell necrotic damage for each point of intelligence. Now remember, this is a poison and necrotic build. I know it seems counterproductive that we're getting this node, but remember, Spirit Plague itself, the ability, curses the target with a necrotic damage over time effect. The only poison bonuses we get are from Plague Bear, which inflicts them with the Plague, and then also Toxic Transmission, which gives them stacks of poison. So we still would like to get more synergistic effects with necrotic, so that's why we go and grab the Plague of Eyes node. Especially since it's going to help us scale, because the more intelligence we have, the more necrotic damage we're doing. From there, you are likely going to get Chthonic Fissure next. However, the third specialization slot unlocks at level 20 character level, so you might have to wait a little bit before you can finally start putting points into Chthonic Fissure. You should still use it, it's still a great skill for us even without points in it, it's just that you won't be able to put points in it until a little bit later. Speaking of Chthonic Fissure points, you're going to instantly jump over to the left of Chthonic Fissure and grab 3 points in Fragile Crust. This makes it so that your Chthonic Fissure costs less mana and refunds some of its mana cost if there is a cursed player, rare enemy, or boss on the 20 meters when you cast it. This helps you a lot with dealing damage against bosses because the biggest problem you run into is not having enough mana to cast your spells and keep dishing out damage and keeping your dots up. You are then going to go to the right of the center node and grab Death from below. This makes it so Chthonic Fissure deals more damage. It also doubles this damage if you're cursed, however we're not doing any curse effects, we're just going here so we can get to the nodes that are nearby. Next you're going to take 1 point into Mantle of Flames, and then you're instantly going to jump to the left and grab Value of Defilement. Mantle of Flames is useful for us, but I will explain why after I explain Value of Defilement. Value of Defilement makes it so your Chthonic Fissure's base fire damage over time is converted to poison damage over time. This makes it so it also scales with poison damage and not fire damage. Any ignite chance from all sources is converted to poison chance per second for the fissure, and swaps the Chthonic Fissure's fire tag for a poison tag. This is insane because we just got Mantle of Flames, which increases your global chance to ignite on hit as ignite chance per second. We will be grabbing 4 full points into this node, but not quite yet. We're going to move above that node into Chronicles of Ruin. We're going to put a point there. Torment lasts longer, and any ignite, poison, or bleed inflicted by Chthonic Fissure lasts longer. Then you're going to jump to the left to Tomb Gorger, and that means your Torment deals more damage to ignited, poisoned, or bleeding enemies. You are then going to jump back to the left past Fragile Crust and put a point into Spirit Gale. Spirit Gale says, when tormented enemies die, they have a chance to release a spirit to inflict and torment another enemy within 8 meters. It's a 25% chance. We're not doing it mainly for damage or anything, we're just doing this point to move to other nodes. We're going to be going down to Damn Waters. The Spirit's hits inflict enemies with Damned, and we're going to be putting 2 points into this, and we're going to be jumping over into Twisted Waves, which is just past it. Torment deals more damage per 2% uncapped necrotic resistance. This also helps us scale because the more necrotic resistance you have over the cap, the more damage this does. You are then going to put 1 point into Severed Wards, which is just to the left of Spirit Gale. The Spirit's hits give necrotic resistance shred stacks, so this 1 point will give us 1 stack per Spirit hit. Then we are finally going to be going back to Mantle Flames and maxing that out. You are then going to jump back up to Chronicles of Ruin, and we're going to be putting the last of our points in there. And this, like I said earlier, makes it so Torment lasts longer and any Ignite, Poison, and Bleed inflicted by Chthonic Fissure lasts longer. The next skill you're likely going to be utilizing is Soul Feast. However, the specialization slot that you can put it in is only unlocked at level 35, so you might be waiting a little while. But with that being said, let's talk about the points you're going to be putting into Soul Feast. First, let me explain what Soul Feast does. Soul Feast feasts on the souls of cursed enemies, dealing necrotic damage to them and drawing fragments of their souls back to you. The soul fragments grant free ward each when they reach you. This ability feasts on up to 13 enemies, prioritizing the ones that are closest to you. This is basically going to be the last button you're hitting, and it's also going to be technically your filler spell for your rotations. So for your skill points for Soul Feast, you're first going to put in a point to Original Sin. This is below the originating node, and this says if the number of cursed enemies within 15 meters is at or below the threshold shortly after you cast Soul Feast, then a number of enemies within that range are marked for death to reach that threshold of cursed enemies. Basically, this makes it so that every enemy, even if they aren't cursed, they will be cursed when you cast this ability, because then, once they are then cursed by marked for death, the next time you cast Soul Feast, they will then be applied to the people that have marked for death, and this will synergize with something we're getting later on in this skill tree. Then you're going to come over and you're going to grab a point of Hunger. This makes it so Soul Feast has increased cast speed and costs less mana. And then you're going to be running over and putting in 4 points into Poison Husks. This makes it so Soul Feast hits have a chance to poison enemies on hit. With 4 points, this makes it a 100% chance to poison on hit. You're then going to be going back to that center node and going to the right and grabbing Soul Seeker. We're going to put 2 points into this. This makes it so the Soul Fragments grant you additional ward based off your intelligence. And then you're going to be going to the right again and grabbing another Strife. When Soul Feast hits an enemy cursed with Spirit Plague, Decrepify, marked for death, or Penance, it spreads those curses from that enemy to a number of other enemies within 5 meters. This does not spread curses that the enemy hit by Soul Feast is not afflicted by. So if it doesn't have Spirit Plague, it's not going to spread Spirit Plague to the other enemies. We're only putting 1 point in this, so that way we can get some extra additional spread in keeping our curses moving around. You're then going to come up to the Engorge node, and you're going to put 3 points in this. Soul Feast costs less mana, and it has a chance, based on your current mana, to draw back a greater Soul Fragment, which grants more ward than the original one does. Then you're going to jump to the left, and you're going to put 3 points into Withering Maw. Soul Feast inflicts Withering on hit, and damage which increases the curse damage that they take. And 3 points gives you 3 stacks. We're then going to be moving to the right for the rest of the skill points that we have. We're going to put 4 points into Rest. This makes it so Soul Fragments from bosses or enemies grant you significantly more ward. With 4 points, this gives us a 340% increased ward granted from rares or bosses. And finally, your last point is going to go next to it and Usurp. Soul Fragments from rares or bosses also grant you mana. Modifiers to the amount of ward granted by Soul Fragments also apply to the amount of mana gained from this node. With this point, mana granted from rares or bosses is 6. This helps you with your sustain for mana and casting. We're now going to be jumping into the final skill, which is called Profane Veil. Now, the last specialization slot only unlocks once you are at level 50, so this is going to be the last skill you're starting to level up and gain points in. Profane Veil makes it so that you channel to conceal yourself within a Profane Veil that deals necrotic damage over time to enemies around you. While concealed, you dodge every hit, but you can still take damage from damage over time effects such as ailments, and you move more slowly. This lasts up for 2 seconds, or also ends when you release the key. Cooldown does not recover during use. This spell is basically our safety net, and you'll see why here in a few moments. For the first skill, we're going to be jumping down and we're going to be grabbing Spirit Plate. This makes it so that damage reduction from armor now also applies to damage over time taken while you are in your Profane Veil. This helps a lot. You are then going to go to the left of the main node and go to Discourage. Profane Veil's area has a chance to slow enemies each second. Additionally, you leech a portion of the global damage you deal as health while in Profane Veil. This helps with your life leech, but we're just going here to get the nodes that are further along. You are then going to jump over to Scorn, the next node over. You deal more global damage to cursed enemies while in Profane Veil. You are going to be putting 5 points in here. You are then going to jump to the left of Scorn, and you're going to be putting in 2 points to Stream of Profanity. Directly casting a curse skill reduces your Profane Veil's remaining cooldown, so this helps us get our Profane Veil up sooner. You're then going to be jumping back below Spirit Plate, and you're going to be putting 3 points in Seance. When a Wandering Spirit is revealed inside Profane Veil's area, the spirit deals more damage in a larger area for the rest of the spirit's duration. Additionally, for each spirit revealed inside Profane Veil's area, you gain ward per uncapped necrotic resistance. So this loops into that uncapped necrotic resistance thing, where not only does it help you with your damage, it now helps you with your survivability. Thanks to the 3 points you're putting into Seance, you will have more survivability. You're then going to come up and put 1 point into Loose Tongue at the top right. Profane Veil will cost you less mana, and then 1 point into Harsh Words, which is to the right. Profane Veil costs less mana again and deals more damage. You're going to come back to the left and put 1 point into Loose Tongue, and then you're going to go down and put 1 point into Unholy Renewal. You can now cleanse all negative ailments on you when you enter Profane Veil. This helps if you have like a DoT on you or any debuff on you. When you enter Profane Veil, it will be removed. You're then going to jump over back to the right and grab Forked Tongue. This makes it so you create a secondary Profane Veil area that is detached from you and moves towards enemies, but Profane Veil now costs you more mana. For your last 3 points, you are going to jump down below Unholy Renewal and grab Eternal Blasphemy. Profane Veil lasts longer and you move faster while in it. This makes it so you get 21% more duration in Profane Veil and 21% movement speed in Profane Veil. An example rotation I'm going to give you is something I do. You can probably min-max this better yourself, but this is what I do. Your main thing is to try and get your curses out as soon as you can on enemies. So the first thing I cast is Spirit Plague, because when Spirit Plague goes off, whenever an enemy dies, it gets to the next enemy. And as soon as an enemy dies, it's going to be happening quickly because you're putting dots on things and you're also casting other abilities. So Spirit Plague first, and then you're going to throw out Chthonic Fissure to get that going. You are then going to cast Wandering Spirits, and right after you cast Wandering Spirits, you're going to hold your Profane Veil key, and you're going to try and stay around your spirits so they gain extra damage. After you come out of Profane Veil, you are then going to start spamming your Soul Feast, and you're going to watch everything just die. Now here's the thing. I told you that rotation, but more than likely what's going to happen is you're going to press your Spirit Plague key and your Chthonic Fissure key, and things are already going to be dead. This build does a lot of damage just with those two abilities alone. If they're not dead, you press your spirit ability, your Wandering Spirits, just save your Profane Veil to dodge an ability or for safety, and then just use Soul Feast. This build works extremely well on like packs and mobs and rares and stuff like that. Your biggest issue is going to be like main bosses, like story bosses and big enemies with like really big health bars. That's where you're going to have an issue. Especially if the enemy moves a lot, because your Chthonic Fissure ability doesn't move itself. It opens up a fissure on the ground and stays there. The only thing that moves out of it is the spirits it shoots out. The base damage and damage of the little fissure that you make on the ground only works if they're standing on it. So you'll have to keep recasting your Chthonic Fissure and placing it back on the enemy as they move. And then you'll have to do it again and again. And you'll have to keep your dots up on the enemy as they move around, and it's kind of annoying. Now that I have spent way too much time talking about just your skills, we can move into the passives. We're going to be here a while. First thing you're going to do, in the Acolyte tree, your main Acolyte tree, you are going to drop in 8 points into Forbidden Knowledge. This gives us intelligence and necrotic resistance for each point. Then, you're going to grab Mania of Mortality. You're going to put 1 point in here, and this is just so whenever a nearby ally, enemy, or minion dies, you have 10% chance to gain ward. It's just extra chance for ward. You're then going to jump back to the first column, and you're going to put 6 points into Bone Ore. This is going to give us armor and minion armor. Minion armor don't care about. The other armor is nice. And we're doing this because you need a minimum of 20 points in the Acolyte tree to start putting points in your Warlock tree. And this is the best option for us. It also allows us to get further into the tree so we can get access to Unnatural Preservation. Unnatural Preservation is the node that is down from Mania or Mortality, that's why we put 1 point in there. And this gives us ward retention, necrotic resistance, and poison resistance per point. We're going to be putting 5 points in this. We're only going to have 20 points in this tree. We're not putting any more in this tree. We're then moving on to the Warlock tree, and you are going to put 5 points into the Soul Stealer node, which increases your mana regen by 20% and reduces the effect cooldowns. You also gain a chance per curse on the enemy to gain mana on hit. With your 5 points in this, it is going to give you 13 mana if it procs, and the chance per curse to gain mana on hit is 13%. We're then going to go up in the column to the top, and we're going to put 5 points into Spiteful Decay. This, with 5 points, increases our damage over time and our health by 20. 20% for the damage over time and 20 points of health. It also gives us a passive when we put 5 points into it, where it says you deal more damage over time to cursed enemies. We're then going to go to the next column over, and we're going to put 5 points into Occultist Mind, which increases our intelligence by 5 with our 5 points. And it gives us a passive with 5 points. It says you gain additional mana per point of intelligence, which is amazing. Having more mana is always nice. We're then going to go right above that to the node called Unholy Torment and put 5 points in that. This increases our area for our curses by 15% and increases our spell damage for curses by 15. We're then going to go to the next column over, and we're going to put 5 points into Vile Tide. This increases our poison chance by 30%. It's also going to give us a passive. When you cast a damage over time skill and enemies within 15 meters have a combined 25 or more stacks of poison, you gain Poison Overload for 12 seconds and cast Defiling Nova, which expands outward, poisoning enemies it hits. We're then going to start grabbing a little bit more survivability, and we're going to jump down in that same column and go into 5 points of Harrowing Armor, which with our 5 points will give us 50 armor and 50 health that we put into it, and it will also give us a passive with our 5 points. You have more armor per unique curse on the attacker when they hit you. This gives you 3% more armor per curse on the target. We will then be going to the node right above that to Ward of Malevolence. You gain additional Ward Decay Threshold, and you gain Ward on Kill. You also gain Ward per 2 points of intelligence while channeling a skill. The only channeling skill we have is Profane Veil, so it will apply to that, but none of our other skills. But it's still nice because Ward Decay Threshold and having that is very nice. With our 5 points, you get 75 Ward Decay Threshold, 15 Ward Gain on Kill, and your ward per second per 2 intelligence while channeling is 5. We're starting to get lower on points at this point, and you're getting closer to level 50. We're going to be putting our last 8 points into 2 nodes. So our first one is going to be Wither, and you're going to be putting 5 points in there, and that is going to give you a 100% chance to apply Withering on hit. And it's going to give us a passive. You take less damage from withered enemies, and that is an 8% reduction in damage from withered enemies with this on there. For our last 3 points, we're going to be going up in the same column to Malefic Body, and it's going to give us a point in intelligence and vitality per point we put into it. So with 3 points, we will have 3 intelligence and 3 vitality. Again, this build is just a leveling build, and it is only up to level 50, but the final category we're going to be talking about is gear, and you are going to be primarily looking for damage over time. You're going to be looking for poison, and you're going to be looking for necrotic damage. Other stats you might want are health and resistances. You're going to need those later on and whenever you get to late game. And like I said, we're going to be making an end-game build, and I'm going to be carrying this build out and adding more points into it. So basically, whenever that build comes out, I'm going to point people who haven't watched this video yet to this video, because I'm going to be talking and branching from it. One of the items or weapons you're going to be looking for is going to be Spine Rods. It's a particular item that can drop in different quantities, but the implicits on it, or the base innate stats that it has on it, is spell damage, melee damage, and increased damage over time. And this is something you want to find, because then you can modify it to your preferences with the crafting system. The crafting system's game is awesome, and I highly recommend you use it through your leveling process. I am also going to be pasting my filter settings in the pinned comment, or maybe in the description, or both, I don't know, I haven't decided yet, so you guys can copy it and paste it into your game. That way it'll be easier for you. It is a template, you will have to update it as you go, but it will save you a lot of time. And the unique thing is that it will not start working until after level 5, so before level 5 you can still find your early common items and magic items, so that way you can still pick stuff up early game. And you can then take that same template and duplicate it, and then modify it for your other builds that you might do. So for example, you could copy it, duplicate it, and then change out certain filters for a mage, or a rogue, or a primalist, whatever fits your needs and whatever build you're doing. You can then create a separate duplicate of this template and then rename it for that specific build you're looking for, and choose all the affixes and stuff you're looking for. I cannot take full credit for this filter because Ziggy D has a video talking about filters. I have never used one before this game, but with how much loot drops and with how often you're finding items and what you're looking for, there's a lot of loot on the screen, which might be some dopamine hits for some of you, but for me it's a lot of clutter, so a filter helped me out once I started really defining my build. I hope this was a fun and unique build for you all to try out and play. I hope you guys give it a shot if you are thinking about it. And without further ado, I will finally end this video by saying thank you all for coming to check out my content. I try to stream every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 4 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. My channel is the same channel as it is here on the YouTube channel, which is Iamcasualty. I hope to see you there. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with your friends or people that you play last Epoch with, maybe your buddies, and subscribe if you really want to see more content from me. Hope you all have a wonderful day, everyone.